The rain started just as Lauren's key snapped in the lock. She stared at the broken piece of metal in her hand, then at the other half still jammed in her apartment door, and felt something inside her chest crack. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just a quiet, tired breaking that came from being one problem away from falling apart for too long. It was nearly midnight. She'd worked a 14-hour day, missed lunch because a client meeting ran over, and spent the last 2 hours on a delayed train that smelled like wet clothing and desperation. Her phone was at 6% battery. Her clothes were soaked from the 3-block walk from the station. And now her key, her only key, because she'd been meaning to get a spare made for months but never found the time, was broken in her door. Lauren leaned her forehead against the cold wood and tried to remember the last time something had actually gone right. The apartment building was old, the kind of place where the elevator worked half the time and the hallway lights flickered ominously after 8 p.m. It was cheap though, which was all that mattered when she'd moved in 3 years ago. Fresh out of a relationship that had left her broken in equal measure. Most of her neighbors were elderly or worked night shifts. At this hour, the building was silent except for the sound of rain hammering against the windows at the end of the hall and the occasional groan of old pipes. Lauren pulled out her phone, trying to think through her options. She could call a locksmith, but that would cost money she didn't have until payday. She could call her landlord, but Mr. Chen didn't answer his phone after 9 p.m. and would probably charge her for an emergency visit anyway. She could try to sleep in the hallway, but the thought of curling up on the stained carpet outside her door made her want to cry. Her phone battery dropped to 5%, as if to emphasize how thoroughly the universe had decided to ruin her night. "Damn it," Lauren whispered, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. She was not going to cry over a broken key. She'd survived worse. She could handle this. Except she was so tired. Tired of handling things. Tired of being strong and practical and capable when all she wanted was for something, anything, to be easy for once. A door opened behind her. Lauren turned, wiping at her face quickly, trying to compose herself. The last thing she needed was for one of her neighbors to see her having a breakdown in the hallway. But the person standing in the doorway of apartment 7C wasn't one of her usual neighbors. It was him. The man everyone in the building avoided. The one people whispered about in the laundry room and crossed the hall to avoid in the elevator. The neighbor who'd moved in 6 months ago and whose presence had immediately changed the entire atmosphere of the 4th floor from merely rundown to vaguely threatening. Lauren had seen him exactly 3 times. Once in the lobby, where he'd held the door for an elderly woman with such careful courtesy that Lauren had wondered if maybe the rumors about him were exaggerated. Once in the hallway, where he'd nodded to her in passing with dark eyes that seemed to see too much. And once in the building's sad excuse for a gym at 2 in the morning when Lauren couldn't sleep, where she'd watched him work through a boxing routine that was clearly professional and more than a little intimidating. She didn't know his name. Didn't know what he did or why someone who could clearly afford better lived in this building. She just knew that something about him made other tenants nervous. Made them whisper about connections and business and things that weren't her concern. He was tall. She'd noticed that before, with the dark hair and the kind of face that would have been handsome if it wasn't so carefully controlled. He wore expensive clothes even at midnight, black slacks and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie. Everything about him spoke of discipline and precision and carefully contained danger. And he was looking at her now with an intensity that made her want to simultaneously hide and stand straighter. "Are you locked out?" His voice was low, quiet, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command attention. Lauren realized she was still holding the broken key piece, standing in front of her door like a disaster in human form. She probably looked exactly as pathetic as she felt, soaked, exhausted, on the verge of tears over a stupid broken key. "Yes," she managed, hating how small her voice sounded. "My key broke. I was just trying to figure out what to do." He studied her for a moment, his dark eyes moving from her face to the broken key to the door and back. Lauren felt exposed under that gaze, like he was cataloging every detail of her current catastrophe. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. "Maybe 10 minutes. Lauren wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly very aware of how cold she was in her wet clothes. I'm sorry if I was being loud. I didn't mean to disturb you. You weren't loud. He stepped further into the hallway, and Lauren noticed he was barefoot, like he'd come to his door the moment he'd heard something in the hall. But you're soaking wet and it's nearly midnight. You need to get inside and warm up. I know, that's the problem. Lauren gestured helplessly at her door. The key broke in the lock. I can't afford a locksmith until payday, and my landlord won't come out until morning. And I don't have anywhere else to go. So I was just trying to figure out if I could maybe sleep in the laundry room or… No, the word was firm, almost sharp. You're not sleeping in the laundry room. Lauren blinked at him, not sure if she should be offended or grateful for his certainty. I don't really have other options. You do. He moved closer, and Lauren had to tilt her head back slightly to maintain eye contact. Up close, she could see that his eyes weren't just dark, but a deep brown that looked almost black in the flickering hallway light. I can get your door open. You can? Hope flared in Lauren's chest before caution caught up. How? Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. I have some experience with locks. If you'll let me try, I can probably get it open without damaging anything. Lauren should probably ask more questions. Should probably wonder why her mysterious, vaguely threatening neighbor had experience picking locks. Should probably be more cautious about accepting help from a man she'd been told to avoid. But she was cold and tired and desperate, and the alternative was sleeping in the laundry room or paying for a locksmith she couldn't afford. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. I really appreciate it. He nodded once, then turned back to his apartment. Wait here. I need to get tools. He disappeared inside, leaving Lauren standing in the hallway, dripping on the carpet, trying to process what was happening. The neighbor everyone feared was helping her. The man people crossed the street to avoid was being ... kind. It didn't fit with the whispered warnings, with the nervous looks, with the general atmosphere of unease that seemed to follow him through the building. He returned less than a minute later carrying a small leather case that looked expensive and well used. He moved to her door without ceremony, kneeling in front of the lock with a grace that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd done this. What's your name? Lauren asked, because it seemed absurd that this man was about to pick her lock and she didn't even know what to call him. Sebastian. He didn't look up from the lock, his hands already working with small metal tools she couldn't identify. Sebastian Moretti. I'm Lauren. She hesitated, then added, Thank you for doing this. I know we don't really know each other, and you didn't have to help, and I really appreciate. You're rambling. But his voice wasn't unkind. It's fine. Give me a minute. Lauren fell silent, watching him work. His movements were precise, controlled, his focus absolute. There was something almost meditative about the way he worked, like picking a lock required the same kind of concentration as surgery or defusing a bomb. The hallway light flickered ominously, and Lauren found herself acutely aware of how isolated they were. The building was silent except for the rain and the soft metallic sounds of Sebastian's tools in her lock. No one else was awake. No one would hear if she screamed. The thought should have frightened her. She was alone with a man everyone said was dangerous, letting him into her apartment, trusting him for no good reason except that she was desperate and he'd offered help. But somehow, standing in that flickering hallway with water dripping from her clothes and exhaustion making her bones ache, Lauren didn't feel afraid. She felt something else entirely. Something like relief. Like maybe, just maybe, something was finally going right. You're tense, Sebastian observed without looking up from the lock. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not. Lauren stopped because she was tense. She'd been tense since the moment he'd stepped into the hallway. Maybe since the moment her key had broken. Maybe since the moment she'd woken up that morning. How did you know? I pay attention. His hands stilled for a moment. And I'm used to people being nervous around me. It's fine. I understand why. Why? Lauren asked before she could stop herself. Why are people nervous around you? Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, his focus seemingly back on the lock. Then quietly, because I'm not a particularly good man, Lauren. And people who pay attention can usually tell. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Not defensiveness or pride or the kind of dark romanticism some men used when they wanted to seem dangerous. Just a simple, factual statement delivered in that same calm tone. Are you dangerous? Lauren asked, her voice barely above a whisper. To you? No. Sebastian's hands moved again, and Lauren heard a soft click. To other people? Sometimes. When necessary. The lock gave way. Sebastian stood, stepping back from the door, and gestured for Lauren to try it. She pushed, and the door swung open easily, revealing her small, dark apartment beyond. Relief flooded through her so intensely, it almost brought tears to her eyes again. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Sebastian was already packing his tools away, his movements efficient. Get inside and get warm. You're shivering. Lauren realized he was right. She'd been standing in wet clothes for so long that she'd stopped noticing the cold. But now that she was aware of it, she couldn't stop shaking. I will. Thank you again, really. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't helped. She hesitated, one hand on her doorframe. Is there anything I can do to repay you? I could make you dinner, or... That's not necessary. But Sebastian's expression had softened slightly. I'm glad I could help. He turned to go, and Lauren felt a sudden, inexplicable reluctance to let him leave. This man, this allegedly dangerous man that everyone avoided, had been nothing but kind to her. Had helped her when he didn't have to. Had been gentle and patient when she was at her most vulnerable. And she wanted to understand why. Wanted to know what made him different from the reputation that preceded him. Wanted to repay the kindness somehow, even though he clearly didn't expect anything in return. Sebastian, she called before he reached his door. He paused, looking back. If you ever need anything, Lauren said quietly. If there's ever anything I can do to help you ... just ask. Okay? Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise maybe, or something deeper that she couldn't identify. Okay, he said finally. Thank you, Lauren. He disappeared into his apartment, leaving Lauren standing in her doorway, dripping and shivering and trying to process what had just happened. The neighbor everyone feared had helped her. Had been gentle and patient and kind in a way that contradicted everything she'd heard about him. And now she was more curious than ever about who Sebastian Moretti really was beneath the reputation and the warnings and the carefully controlled exterior. Lauren stepped into her apartment, closed the door behind her, and leaned against it for a long moment. She should change into dry clothes, should eat something, should charge her phone and get ready for bed because tomorrow was going to come too early and she was already exhausted. But instead, she found herself thinking about dark eyes and careful hands and a voice that had been nothing but kind even while admitting to being dangerous. Sebastian Moretti was a mystery. And Lauren had never been good at leaving mysteries unsolved. Lauren didn't see Sebastian again for 3 days. Not in the hallway, not in the lobby, not in the building's small gym during her usual late-night insomnia workouts. It was like he'd vanished, though she knew he was still there because she could occasionally hear movement from his apartment, footsteps, doors opening and closing, the low murmur of what might have been phone conversations. She told herself she wasn't looking for him. Wasn't paying extra attention to sounds from 7C or timing her comings and goings in hopes of running into him in the hall. She was just ... aware. Curious about the man who'd helped her and then disappeared back into whatever isolated existence he maintained. On the 4th day, Lauren got home from work to find a package outside her door. Small, wrapped in plain brown paper, with her apartment number written in precise handwriting on top. No name, no return address. She carried it inside, intrigued and slightly wary. She wasn't expecting any deliveries, hadn't ordered anything online. The package was light, maybe the size of a paperback book. Lauren set it on her kitchen counter and studied it for a moment, wondering if she should be concerned. But something about the careful handwriting felt familiar, though she couldn't place why. She opened it carefully, pulling away the brown paper to reveal a small black box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were 2 things: a brand new apartment key on a simple keyring, and a note written in that same precise handwriting. You mentioned needing a spare. I had this made from the lock pattern. Keep it somewhere safe. Lauren stared at the key, then at the note, feeling something warm and unexpected bloom in her chest. Sebastian had made her a spare key. had thought about her problem and solved it without being asked, without expecting anything in return. It was such a small gesture, practical, even. But it felt significant in a way Lauren couldn't quite articulate. Like he'd been thinking about her. Like her problems mattered to him, even though they barely knew each other. She picked up the key, running her thumb over the cool metal, and made a decision. 10 minutes later, Lauren was standing outside apartment 7C with a plate of cookies she'd stress-baked the night before when she couldn't sleep. It wasn't much. She wasn't a great baker, and the cookies were slightly burnt on the edges, but it felt important to acknowledge what he'd done. To say thank you properly. She knocked before she could second-guess herself. The door opened almost immediately, and Sebastian stood there in dark jeans and a black t-shirt that made him look simultaneously more casual and somehow more dangerous than the dress clothes she'd seen him in before. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently showered, and there was a faint shadow of stubble along his jaw that made him look less controlled than usual. Lauren. His expression shifted from guarded to something warmer when he recognized her. Is everything all right? Yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to bother you. Lauren held up the plate. I just wanted to say thank you. For the key. You didn't have to do that. Sebastian's eyes moved to the cookies, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. You baked for me? I stress bake when I can't sleep, Lauren admitted. They're not very good, but they're edible, and I felt like I owed you more than just words after everything you did. You don't owe me anything. But Sebastian accepted the plate, his fingers brushing against hers briefly in the transfer. The contact was brief, professional, but Lauren felt it like electricity. Thank you, though. This is thoughtful. They stood there for a moment in awkward silence, and Lauren realized she hadn't actually planned beyond handing him cookies. She should probably leave now. Let him get back to whatever he'd been doing. Stop bothering the man who'd already done more than enough for her. But she found herself asking, how did you make the key? I thought you needed the original to copy it. You do, usually. Sebastian leaned against his doorframe, still holding the plate. But I have some specialized equipment that can read a lock and create a key from the pattern. It's not something most people have access to. Because you have experience with locks, Lauren said, echoing what he'd told her that first night. Among other things. His dark eyes studied her face, searching for something. Does it bother you? Not knowing exactly what I do or why I have unusual skills. Lauren considered this. It should bother her. Should raise all kinds of red flags that a normal, rational person would pay attention to. But somehow it didn't. A little, she admitted honestly. But not as much as it probably should. I figure, if you were going to hurt me, you had plenty of opportunity the other night when I was locked out and vulnerable. You chose to help instead. That tells me more about your character than rumors or mysterious skills. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, quietly, that's a dangerous way to evaluate people, Lauren. Trusting them based on a single moment of kindness. Maybe. She met his gaze directly. But I'm good at reading people. It's part of my job. And you don't feel dangerous to me. Reserved, yes. Private, definitely. But not dangerous. You should trust your instincts less. But there was no real heat in his words. I am dangerous, even if I don't feel like it to you. To me specifically, or to people in general? In general. Sebastian shifted, and Lauren got the sense he was debating how much to tell her. I work in private security. Sometimes that involves situations that require a certain skill set. Skills that make neighbors nervous and give me a reputation I can't entirely shake. Private security. That made sense, actually. Explain the physical fitness. The odd hours. The way he moved with such careful awareness of his surroundings. It also explained why people might be wary. Private security for the wealthy often meant dealing with dangerous situations and dangerous people. Are you good at it? Lauren asked. Your job? Very. No false modesty, just a statement of fact. I've been doing it a long time. Then I'm glad. Lauren smiled. The world needs people who are good at keeping others safe, even if the methods are sometimes unconventional. Something in Sebastian's expression shifted, softened in a way that made him look younger, less guarded. That's a generous interpretation. It's an accurate one. Lauren checked her phone, realizing she'd been standing in his doorway for almost 10 minutes. I should let you go. I'm sure you have better things to do than talk to your neighbor about your job. I don't actually. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised Lauren. I mean, if you wanted to come in for a minute, I could make coffee. As thanks for the cookies. Lauren should say no. Should maintain appropriate boundaries with her mysterious neighbor who'd already helped her more than enough. Should not get more involved in whatever complicated life Sebastian Moretti led. I'd like that, she heard herself say. Sebastian stepped back, holding the door open wider in invitation. Lauren walked into apartment 7C and immediately noticed how different it was from her own cluttered, lived-in space. His apartment was immaculate, minimally furnished with expensive-looking pieces that suggested either excellent taste or the work of a professional decorator. Everything was organized, clean, precise. There were no personal photos on the walls, no knickknacks or clutter, nothing that revealed anything about who lived here beyond someone who valued order and efficiency. It felt lonely, Lauren thought. Like a hotel room rather than a home. Beautiful but impersonal. Carefully maintained but unlived in. You keep it very clean, she observed as Sebastian moved to the kitchen area. I'm not here much. He was already pulling out a coffee maker that looked more expensive than Lauren's entire kitchen. And I prefer order. Clutter makes it hard to think. I'm the opposite, Lauren admitted, settling onto one of the bar stools at his kitchen counter. My apartment is organized chaos. I know where everything is, but it probably looks like a disaster to anyone else. I noticed. There was amusement in his voice. When I picked your lock, I could see into your entryway. You have a very eclectic decorating style. Lauren laughed. That's a polite way of saying I have no decorating style. I just accumulate things and shove them wherever they fit. It suits you. Sebastian set a mug of coffee in front of her. Black, with cream and sugar on the side so she could customize it. The consideration of that small gesture made her chest feel warm. Your space feels lived in. Comfortable. Like someone actually exists there instead of just occupying the space. Unlike yours? Lauren asked gently. Sebastian looked around his pristine apartment, his expression unreadable. Unlike mine, he agreed quietly. I've never been good at making places feel like home. I'm not sure I know how. There was something in his voice, a loneliness that echoed the feeling Lauren had gotten from his apartment. Like he'd been alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have a home instead of just a place to sleep. How long have you lived here? Lauren asked. 6 months. Sebastian leaned against the counter across from her, his own coffee mug cradled in his hands. I needed a place that was functional and private. This building isn't luxurious, but it's secure enough and people generally mind their own business. Except when they're whispering about you in the laundry room, Lauren said before she could stop herself. Sebastian's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. You've heard the whispers? Everyone has. Lauren took a sip of her coffee. It was excellent, strong and smooth in a way her cheap grocery store brand never managed. People say you connected. That you're involved in things that aren't exactly legal. That we should all stay away from you. And yet here you are. In my apartment, drinking my coffee. Here I am. Lauren agreed. Because I don't believe everything I hear, and because you were kind to me when you didn't have to be, and because I'm curious about the man behind the reputation. Curiosity can be dangerous, but Sebastian's eyes were warm despite the warning in his words. So can isolation. Lauren held his gaze. And from where I'm sitting, you seem more isolated than dangerous. The observation hung in the air between them. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was trying to decide how much truth to share. I am isolated, he said finally. By choice, mostly. My work requires discretion, and discretion requires distance. It's easier to keep people safe, including myself, if I don't get too close to anyone. That sounds lonely. It is. Sebastian's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was stating a simple truth rather than admitting to something painful. But lonely is safer than the alternative, Lauren understood that sentiment more than she probably should. She'd spent years keeping people at arm's length, building walls around herself after her last relationship had nearly destroyed her. Lonely was safer. Lonely meant no one could hurt you. But lonely also meant moments like this, sitting in a beautiful, empty apartment across from someone who seemed just as isolated as she was, both of them pretending they'd chosen this instead of having it chosen for them by circumstance and self-protection. I get that, Lauren said quietly. The choosing lonely over vulnerable thing.
I do it too. Sebastian's eyes sharpened with interest. Why?
Long story. Bad relationship. The usual reasons people build walls and stop trusting that anyone will stay. Lauren wrapped her hands around her mug, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. I'm working on it. The walls, I mean. Trying to figure out how to let people in again without being terrified they'll leave or hurt me or turn out to be someone completely different from who I thought they were. That's brave. Sebastian's voice was soft. Trying again after being hurt. Or stupid. Lauren laughed without much humor. I haven't decided which yet. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both wrapped in their own thoughts. Lauren realized this was the most honest conversation she'd had in months, maybe years. There was something about Sebastian's quiet presence, his own obvious isolation, that made it easy to admit to things she usually kept carefully hidden. Thank you, she said finally. For the key. For the coffee. For listening without judging. Thank you, Sebastian replied. For not treating me like the monster everyone else seems to think I am. You're not a monster. Lauren said it with certainty. You're just someone who's been alone for a long time and forgotten how to be anything else. Sebastian studied her face for a long moment, his dark eyes searching. You see too much, Lauren. So do you, she smiled. I noticed, that first night. The way you looked at me like you could see everything I was trying to hide. It should have been unsettling, but it wasn't. It felt like being seen. Really seen. For the first time in a long time. I know the feeling. Sebastian's voice was rough. You do the same thing. Look at people like you're trying to understand them instead of judge them. It's rare. Lauren finished her coffee, reluctantly recognizing that she should probably leave before this moment became something more complicated than it already was. But she found herself asking, would you want to do this again sometime? Coffee, I mean. Or dinner. As neighbors. As friends, maybe. Sebastian was quiet for a moment, and Lauren worried she'd pushed too far. But then he nodded. I'd like that. I don't have many friends. I'm not sure I remember how to be one. But I'd like to try. Good. Lauren stood, carrying her mug to the sink before Sebastian could object. Then we'll figure it out together. Two isolated people learning how to be a little less isolated. Deal. Sebastian walked her to the door, his movements careful and controlled. And Lauren? Thank you. For not being afraid of me. It's nice. Being treated like a person instead of a threat. You are a person, Lauren said firmly. Whatever else you might be, whatever your job involves, you're a person first. Don't forget that. She left before he could respond, but she felt his eyes on her all the way back to her own apartment. And when she closed her door behind her, Lauren found herself smiling for the first time in days. Maybe Sebastian Moretti was dangerous. Maybe the rumors had some truth to them. Maybe getting close to him was a risk she shouldn't take, but he was also kind. And lonely. And saw her in a way that felt profound rather than invasive. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth the risk. Over the next 2 weeks, Lauren and Sebastian fell into an unexpected routine. It started with coffee. Sebastian knocked on her door one evening with 2 cups from the expensive cafe 3 blocks away, asking if she wanted company while she worked on the financial reports she'd brought home. Lauren said yes, and they spent 3 hours at her cluttered kitchen table, working in comfortable silence broken by occasional conversation about nothing in particular. Then it was dinner. Lauren mentioned she was too tired to cook, and Sebastian offered to order Thai food if she'd help him figure out his streaming service because he couldn't get any of the recommendations to work properly. They ate pad thai on his pristine couch, and Lauren tried not to laugh at how frustrated he got with technology that was supposed to be intuitive. Then it was walks. Late-night walks when neither of them could sleep,
wandering through the quiet neighborhood streets, talking about books they'd read and places they'd traveled and small moments from their days that somehow felt significant when shared with someone who actually listened. It was easy in a way Lauren hadn't expected. Easy to be around Sebastian, to exist in his presence without performance or pretense. He didn't ask probing questions about her past or push for information she wasn't ready to share. He just was there, present and attentive, and somehow making her small apartment feel less empty, just by occasionally occupying space in it. But she still didn't know much about him beyond surface details. Didn't know about his family or his past or the specifics of what his work actually involved. And she was starting to realize that the not knowing was deliberate, that Sebastian maintained careful boundaries around the personal details of his life, even while growing increasingly comfortable in hers. It should have bothered her more than it did. On a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the night he picked her lock, Lauren was heading home from work when she saw him in the building lobby. But he wasn't alone. 3 men stood with him. Expensive suits, hard eyes, the kind of people who radiated danger even from across a room. They were speaking in low voices, and even from the entrance, Lauren could see the tension in Sebastian's posture. The way his entire demeanor had shifted from the relaxed version she'd come to know to something colder and more controlled. This was the Sebastian other people saw. The one that made them nervous. The one they whispered about. One of the men noticed Lauren and said something to Sebastian. His head turned, his eyes finding hers across the lobby, and for a moment something flickered in his expression, concern, maybe, or warning. Then he said something to the men, brief and final, and they left through the front entrance. Sebastian waited until they were gone before approaching Lauren. "Hi," he said, and his voice was carefully neutral. "How was work?" "Fine." Lauren studied his face, seeing the tension he was trying to hide. "Are you okay?" That looked intense. "Just business." Sebastian's jaw was tight. "Nothing you need to worry about." It was the most dismissive he'd ever been with her, and Lauren felt something in her chest constrict. This was the wall he'd warned her about, the boundary he maintained around his work, around the parts of his life that were dangerous or complicated or things she was better off not knowing. "Sebastian, I should go." He was already moving toward the elevator. "I have some calls to make. I'll talk to you later." He was gone before Lauren could respond, leaving her standing in the lobby feeling suddenly, acutely aware of how little she actually knew about the man she'd been spending almost every evening with for 3 weeks. Lauren went to her apartment, made dinner she barely tasted, and tried not to think about the look in those men's eyes or the tension in Sebastian's shoulders or what kind of business required. Meetings that made even someone as controlled as him look unsettled. She failed at all 3. At 11 p.m., there was a knock on her door. Lauren looked through the peephole to find Sebastian standing in the hallway. And even through the distorted glass, she could see the exhaustion in his posture. She opened the door. "Hi. I'm sorry." Sebastian's voice was rough. For earlier. For being dismissive. "You didn't deserve that." "It's okay." "It's not." He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its usual perfection. "Can I come in? I want to explain." "You deserve an explanation." Lauren stepped aside, letting him into her apartment. Sebastian moved to her couch but didn't sit, instead standing with his hands in his pockets, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. "The men you saw," he began quietly. "They're associates, people I work with occasionally. And the meeting was about a situation that's single quotes got complicated, potentially dangerous. The kind of thing I try very hard to keep separate from the rest of my life. From me," Lauren said softly. "From you." Sebastian's dark eyes met hers. "I told you I work in private security, that's true. But what I didn't tell you is that my clients aren't always people you'd want to associate with. Wealthy, yes. Powerful, absolutely. But sometimes they're on the wrong side of legal, and sometimes protecting them means operating in gray areas that most people would find uncomfortable." Lauren absorbed this, trying to reconcile it with the man who'd picked her lock and made her coffee and listened patiently while she rambled about her frustrating day at work. "Are you telling me you're a criminal?" "I'm telling you I'm not always a good guy." Sebastian's voice was steady, but there was pain underneath. I don't steal or kill or engage in the things most people think of as serious crime. But I protect people who sometimes do. I help them stay safe, stay hidden, stay ahead of the authorities or their enemies. And that makes me complicit in ways that are hard to justify.
Why do you do it? Lauren asked. If it bothers you, why continue? Sebastian was quiet for a long moment.
Because I'm very good at it. Because the money allows me to live comfortably and help people I care about. And because ... double quotes, he paused. Because it's what I know. I was raised in this world. My father worked for people like my current clients. I learned from him, and when he died, I took over his contracts. I've tried to operate more ethically than he did, to draw lines he never bothered with. But I'm still part of a system I can't entirely defend.
Lauren processed this, understanding crystallizing.
This was why Sebastian was so isolated. Why he kept people at a distance. Why his apartment felt like a hotel room, and why neighbors whispered about him with nervous suspicion.
He was protecting them, keeping them separate from the dangerous world he operated in.
Making sure that if anything went wrong, the people around him wouldn't be caught in the fallout.
Thank you, she said quietly, for telling me, for trusting me with this. Sebastian's expression was guarded.
You're not going to tell me to stay away from you? To stop coming around? Should I?
Lauren asked.
Do you think you're a danger to me?
Not directly. I would never hurt you, Lauren.
But being associated with me could be complicated if anyone in my professional life decided to use you as leverage. His voice was tight with controlled emotion. That's why I try not to get close to people.
Why I live the way I do. It's safer for everyone if I maintain distance. Safer maybe. Lauren moved closer, drawn by the pain she could hear under his careful words, but also lonely. And you've been lonely long enough, Sebastian. We both have. Lauren, I'm not saying I'm not concerned, she interrupted gently.
I am. This is ... it's a lot.
And I need time to process what you've told me. But I'm not running. Not yet. Not without understanding what I'd be running from. Sebastian looked at her like she'd said something impossible. You should run.
Most people would. I'm not most people.
Lauren managed a small smile. And you're not the monster you seem to think you are.
Monsters don't warn people away. They don't try to protect them by maintaining distance. They don't look as torn up as you do right now about potentially putting someone at risk. That doesn't make me good.
No. Lauren agreed. But it makes you human. Complicated and flawed and trying to navigate impossible situations.
That's not the same as evil.
Sebastian closed his eyes, taking a shaky breath. When he opened them again, there was something raw and vulnerable in his expression that made Lauren's chest ache. I don't deserve your understanding. You don't get to decide that. She echoed words he'd said to her weeks ago.
During one of their late-night conversations. I decide what I'm willing to understand and what I'm not.
And right now, I'm deciding to understand that you're doing your best in a difficult situation. My best isn't very good. But Sebastian's voice had lost some of its harsh edge. Your best got you out of your father's shadow.
Got you to a place where you can draw ethical lines even in an unethical business. Got you to the point where you're warning me away instead of pulling me deeper. Lauren reached for his hand, holding it gently.
That's better than you're giving yourself credit for. Sebastian looked down at their joined hands, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. I'm trying to do better. To find a way out of this world that doesn't leave me completely exposed or vulnerable. But it's taking time, and in the meantime, I'm still involved in things I'm not proud of. Then we'll figure it out together, Lauren said firmly.
If you want out, we'll find a way. If you want to stay but operate more ethically, we'll figure out what that looks like. But you don't have to do it alone anymore, Sebastian.
You have a friend. Someone who knows what you do and isn't running. Why? The question was barely a whisper.
Why would you stay when you know what I am?
Because I know who you are too. Lauren squeezed his hand. You're the man who helped me when I was locked out. Who made me a spare key without being asked. Who listens when I ramble and makes excellent coffee and looks at me like I matter. She paused. You're complicated and operating in gray areas I don't fully understand. But you're also kind and lonely and trying to be better than you were. And that's enough for me. For now. Sebastian pulled her into his arms then, holding her carefully like she was something precious and fragile. Lauren let herself lean into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. The way his breathing gradually slowed, as some of the tension left his body. They stood like that for a long time, neither speaking, just existing together in the quiet comfort of not being alone. "Thank you," Sebastian finally whispered into her hair. "For not running, for trying to understand, for making me feel less like a monster and more like a person." "You are a person," Lauren said firmly. "Don't forget that." They eventually separated, but Sebastian didn't leave. They spent the rest of the evening on Lauren's couch, talking about nothing and everything, carefully navigating around the heavy topics they'd just discussed but finding comfort in each other's presence anyway. And when Sebastian finally went back to his own apartment in the early hours of the morning, Lauren lay awake thinking about ethical lines and gray areas and complicated men who were trying to be better than their circumstances. She should probably be more worried. Should probably create distance until she understood exactly what Sebastian's work involved and what risks came with being close to him. But instead, she found herself more committed than ever to understanding him, to helping him find a way out if that's what he wanted. To being the friend he clearly needed, even if it meant navigating complicated situations she'd never imagined being part of. Sebastian Moretti was dangerous. He'd admitted as much. But he was also worth the risk. And Lauren had spent too long playing it safe to back away now. The situation came to a head 2 weeks later. Lauren was working late at her desk, reviewing financial projections that were due the next morning, when she heard shouting in the hallway. Male voices, angry and aggressive, followed by a crash that sounded like something heavy hitting a wall. Her heart jumped into her throat. It was nearly midnight. The building should have been quiet. More shouting. A door slamming. Then silence. Lauren sat frozen at her desk, trying to decide what to do. Call the police? Check the hallway? Lock her door and pretend she hadn't heard anything? Then she heard Sebastian's voice, low and controlled but with an edge that made her blood run cold. "You need to leave. Now. Before this becomes a situation neither of us can walk away from." Another voice responded. Angry, threatening, saying things Lauren couldn't make out, but that sounded like violence waiting to happen. She was moving before she made a conscious decision, grabbing her phone and opening her door just enough to see down the hallway. Sebastian stood outside his apartment, positioned between his door and two men who radiated aggression. Both were larger than him, both clearly angry, both looking like they wanted to turn the verbal confrontation physical. "You don't get to walk away from this," one of them growled. "You took the contract. I owe you exactly what was agreed upon." Sebastian's voice was deadly calm. "Which I've delivered." "What I don't owe you is participation in activities that cross lines I'm not willing to cross. So I'm done." "Find someone else." "That's not how this works." "That's exactly how this works." Sebastian shifted slightly, and Lauren recognized the movement from watching him in the building's gym. He was preparing for a fight, positioning himself for maximum advantage. "You can accept that and leave, or you can make this ugly. Your choice." Lauren's hand tightened on her phone. She should call 911. Should get help before this escalated into violence. But something stopped her. The memory of Sebastian saying his work sometimes put him in situations where police involvement would be complicated. For everyone. One of the men stepped forward aggressively. "You think you can just... I think you should listen to him." The words were out of Lauren's mouth before she realized she was speaking. All three men turned to look at her, and Lauren felt her courage waver under their attention. But Sebastian's expression, shock mixed with concern mixed with something that looked almost like fear, steadied her. He was afraid for her, she realized. Afraid these men would see her as leverage or collateral damage. Which meant she needed to make it very clear that she wasn't a vulnerability to exploit. "I've already called the police," Lauren said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "They'll be here in about 5 minutes. So unless you want to explain to them why you're threatening my neighbor in the middle of the night, I suggest you leave." It was a bluff. She hadn't called anyone. But the two men didn't know that, and the mention of police made them exchange uncertain glances. "This isn't over," one of them said to Sebastian, but
but he was already backing toward the elevator.
Yes, it is. Sebastian's voice was flat, final.
Don't come back here, don't call me. Don't involve me in your business again.
We're done. The men left, and the hallway fell into heavy silence. Sebastian turned to Lauren, and the expression on his face made her chest ache. Fury and fear and gratitude all tangled together. Inside, he said quietly. Now. Lauren retreated into her apartment, and Sebastian followed, closing and locking the door behind them with controlled precision. Then he rounded on her, and she'd never seen him this agitated. What were you thinking? His voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. You just made yourself visible to people who are dangerous, Lauren. People who now know you exist, know where you live, know you're connected to me. I was thinking you were about to get into a fight with two men who clearly wanted to hurt you. Lauren wrapped her arms around herself. I was thinking that making them believe the police were coming was better than watching you get beaten up in the hallway. I can handle myself in a fight. I know. I've seen you train. Lauren met his eyes steadily.
But you shouldn't have to. Not in your own home. Not when I could help. Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, pacing her small living room like a caged animal. You don't understand what you've done. Those men work for one of the most dangerous crime families in the city. By involving yourself, by making them see you as connected to me, you've put yourself at risk. Then we'll deal with it. Lauren tried to sound calmer than she felt. Together, like we said we would. This isn't what I meant when I said we'd figure things out together. Sebastian's control was cracking, real fear bleeding through. I meant I'd work on extracting myself from this world. I didn't mean you'd throw yourself into danger to protect me.
Well, I did. Lauren's voice rose to match his.
Because you're my friend, and friends don't stand by and do nothing when someone they care about is being threatened. So yes, I made them see me. Yes, I possibly put myself at risk.
But I'd do it again because the alternative was watching you face them alone, and I couldn't do that. Sebastian stopped pacing, staring at her like she'd said something incomprehensible. Why? The word was almost desperate. Why would you risk yourself for me? Because you matter to me. Lauren said it simply, honestly.
Because you're not just my neighbor anymore. You're someone I care about.
Someone I trust. Someone who's been alone for too long and deserves to have people stand with them instead of running when things get difficult. Lauren, Sebastian's voice cracked. I'm not running, she said firmly. Whatever happens now, whatever complications come from this, we handle it together. That's what you do when you care about someone. You don't abandon them when things get messy.
Sebastian crossed the room in 3 strides,
pulling her into his arms with an intensity that took her breath away. He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair, his breathing uneven. You're going to give me a heart attack, he muttered. Pulling stunts like that. Good. Lauren wrapped her arms around him, holding on just as tightly. Now you know how I felt watching you navigate dangerous situations alone. They stood like that for a long time, neither willing to let go. Eventually, Sebastian pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands coming up to cup her cheeks with a tenderness that made her heart ache. I need to keep you safe, he said quietly. That's non-negotiable.
Which means things have to change. What kind of things?
I'm done with this work.
All of it.
Sebastian's voice was steady, certain.
I've been trying to extricate myself gradually to avoid burning bridges that could become dangerous. But tonight showed me that gradual isn't working.
I need to be completely out. Now. Won't that be risky? Leaving suddenly? Yes. Sebastian's jaw tightened.
But less risky than continuing to operate in a world where people like you can become collateral damage. I have money saved. Legitimate investments.
I can survive without these contracts. It'll be uncomfortable for a while, but I'll manage. We'll manage, Lauren corrected. Remember?
We're figuring this out together. Something in Sebastian's expression shifted, softened, and hardened at the same time.
You're too brave for your own good. So are you. Lauren managed a smile. We make quite a pair.
We do. Sebastian's thumb brushed across her cheekbone in a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. I'm falling in love with you. I know it's too soon, and the timing is terrible, and I'm probably the last person you should be falling for. But I need you to know.
Because if something happens, Nothing's going to happen. Lauren cut him off, her heart pounding at his confession.
We're going to be careful and smart and we're going to get through this. And, Sebastian?
I'm falling in love with you too.
So we're both crazy apparently.
Sebastian laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. Apparently. He kissed her then, and it was everything their relationship had been building toward. Tender and intense, careful and desperate, the kiss of two people who'd been alone too long and were terrified and exhilarated by finally letting someone in. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. We're going to be okay, he said quietly. I'll make sure of it. We're going to be okay, Lauren echoed. Together. And standing in her small apartment with sirens wailing somewhere in the distance, and the memory of danger still fresh, Lauren believed it. They would figure this out. They would navigate the complicated extraction from Sebastian's dangerous work. They would deal with whatever fallout came from tonight's confrontation. Because they were doing it together. And together was stronger than alone had ever been.
The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos.
Sebastian moved quickly to extract himself from his existing contracts, calling in favors, negotiating exits, making it clear to everyone in his professional network that he was done. Some contacts accepted it gracefully. Others pushed back, trying to leverage loyalty or obligation or veiled threats to keep him involved. Sebastian handled all of it with the same calm efficiency he brought to everything else. But Lauren could see the toll it took. The tension in his shoulders that never quite left. The way he checked his phone compulsively, anticipating problems. The nights he barely slept, too keyed up with adrenaline to rest. Through it all, Lauren stayed close. She couldn't help with the professional extraction. That was Sebastian's world. And she understood her limitations. But she could be there. Could listen when he needed to talk, provide distraction when he needed to think about something else, offer comfort when the stress became overwhelming. They spent most evenings together now, either in her apartment or his, the pretense of being just neighbors long abandoned. They weren't dating exactly. The situation was too complicated for traditional romance. But they were something. Partners, maybe. Two people navigating an impossible situation together. Lauren learned things about Sebastian during those weeks. Small details that made him more real, more human than the controlled exterior he usually presented. He was a terrible cook but an excellent baker, able to produce perfect croissants from scratch, but completely baffled by how to make pasta that didn't stick together. He listened to classical music when he worked out, something about the structure helping him focus. He'd learned to pick locks from his father at age 12, along with dozens of other skills that were useful in their world and deeply concerning to anyone outside it. He'd tried to leave before, multiple times over the years, attempting to build a legitimate life separate from the family business. But every time something had pulled him back. Obligation, loyalty, the simple reality that he was very good at work that paid extremely well and he had people depending on that income. My sister, he admitted one night, lying on Lauren's couch with his head in her lap while she ran her fingers through his hair. She's in a private facility, very expensive. She had a breakdown a few years ago, and the standard treatment options weren't enough. This place is the only one that's actually helped, but insurance doesn't cover it. I pay out of pocket. Is that why you stayed? Lauren asked gently. In the work you wanted to leave, to take care of her? Partly. Sebastian's eyes were closed, his voice tired. That and fear. I didn't know how to be anything else. Didn't know if I could survive in the normal world doing normal work. So I told myself I was staying for her, but really I was just scared to try being someone different. And now? Now I'm more scared of what happens if I don't change. He opened his eyes, looking up at her. I'm scared of you getting hurt because of me. Scared of living this half-life where I can never fully trust anyone or be fully known. Scared of becoming my father, so committed to this world that I lose everything else. You won't become him, Lauren said it with certainty. You're nothing like what you've described. You care too much. You're trying too hard. That's not who he was. How do you know? Because you're here. Because you're getting out. Because you're terrified of hurting people. And men like your father don't feel that fear.
She leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to his forehead. You're going to be okay, Sebastian. Different, probably. But okay. He reached up, pulling her down for a proper kiss, slow and deep and full of things neither of them had words for yet. I don't deserve you, he murmured against her lips.
Stop saying that. Lauren pulled back just enough to look at him.
You're going to keep deserving me by continuing to be the person you're trying to become.
That's how this works.
On a Thursday evening 3 weeks after the confrontation in the hallway, Sebastian came to her apartment with a bottle of good wine and an expression that was equal parts exhausted and relieved.
It's done, he said simply. I'm out. All contracts terminated. All bridges burned or carefully maintained. All loose ends tied up.
I'm officially retired from private security for morally questionable clients.
Lauren felt something in her chest release that she hadn't realized she'd been holding.
Really? It's over? Really? Sebastian set down the wine and pulled her into his arms. There might be some fallout still. People might not be happy about how things ended. But contractually, legally, free. For the first time since I was 18, I don't have obligations to people who scare me. How does it feel?
Lauren asked, wrapping her arms around his waist.
Terrifying.
Sebastian laughed shakily. I don't know what I'm going to do now.
I have savings and investments that'll keep me comfortable for a while, but I'll need to figure out actual employment eventually. Something legitimate? Something I can be proud of.
You will. Lauren squeezed him tighter. We'll figure it out. Together. Together. Sebastian pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes intense. I like the sound of that. Me too.
They opened the wine, ordered pizza, and spent the evening on Lauren's couch, talking about the future in a way that felt simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Sebastian wanted to maybe start a legitimate security consulting firm, one that worked with ethical clients and operated completely above board.
Lauren had ideas about financial structuring and business plans. Together, they sketched out possibilities on the back of napkins, the vision growing clearer with each conversation. It was exciting, hopeful, the kind of planning you did when you believed in a future together.
Move in with me, Sebastian said suddenly, sometime after midnight when they were both wine-tipsy and comfortable.
Lauren blinked. What?
Move in with me. Or I'll move in with you. Or we'll find a new place together. He was sitting up now, fully focused on her.
I don't want to be in separate apartments anymore. I don't want to say goodnight at your door and walk 20 feet down the hall to sleep alone.
I want to fall asleep with you and wake up with you and build a life that's actually a life instead of just existing in adjacent spaces.
Sebastian. That single quotes double quotes Lauren trailed off, trying to process. That's huge. We've only known each other for a few months. We've only been whatever we are for a few weeks. I know. Sebastian took her hands. And if you're not ready, I'll wait.
But Lauren, I've spent my entire adult life being alone.
Being careful. Keeping everyone at a distance because it was safer and easier and what I was good at. And I'm done with that.
I'm done with safe and easy and alone.
I want messy and complicated and together. With you. If you'll have me. Lauren looked at him. This man who'd started as her mysterious, frightening neighbor and become something so much more. Someone who saw her completely and chose her anyway. Someone who was trying to be better, to build a different life, to risk vulnerability after years of armor. Okay, she said, the word coming out part laugh, part sob. Yes, let's do it. Let's be messy and complicated and together. Sebastian kissed her then, deep and thorough, like he was sealing a promise. And maybe he was. A promise that they'd figure this out together, that they'd build something real from the wreckage of their separate lonelinesses, that they'd take the risk of being known and loved despite all their broken pieces. When they finally broke apart, both grinning like idiots, Sebastian pressed his forehead to hers. Thank you, he whispered. For not running, for staying when anyone rational would have left. For seeing me and choosing me anyway. Thank you, Lauren replied. For picking my lock and making me coffee and being brave enough to let someone in.
For being worth the risk. They fell asleep that night on Lauren's couch, tangled together, both content in a way neither had been in years. And if Lauren woke up sometime in the early morning to find Sebastian watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache, she didn't mention it. She just smiled and pulled him closer, choosing love over fear, connection over safety, together over alone. Because sometimes the scariest thing was letting someone see you completely. And sometimes the neighbor everyone feared was exactly the person you needed most.